Welcome back. Settle in. Pull your blanket a little closer. Tonight, we are going to step far, far away from the noise of modern life and travel back to a small, quiet village somewhere in medieval England. The year is around 1250 AD. The world is slower here, much, much slower. The sky is darker, the nights are longer, and the days are measured not by clocks, but by the soft movement of the sun across a pale gray sky. Tonight, you are going to spend a full day alongside a medieval farmer. His name is Thomas. He lives in a small thatched cottage at the edge of a village called Ashwick. He has never seen a city. He has never traveled more than 20 miles from his home. He wakes before sunrise. He works until his body aches, and he sleeps the moment his head touches his straw mattress. His life is simple, his life is slow, and tonight you will live it with him. It is 4:30 in the morning, and the world outside Thomas's cottage is completely black. There are no streetlights, there are no phones glowing in the dark. There is only the faint silver shimmer of a crescent moon hanging low over the fields, and the occasional soft hoot of an owl somewhere in the distant tree line. Thomas does not use an alarm clock. No one in medieval England does. Instead, he wakes because his body has been trained for years, decades really, to rise before the sun. Farmers like Thomas go to sleep so early in the evening, usually not long after dark, that by 4 or 5 in the morning they have already had 7 or 8 hours of rest. He lies still for a moment on his straw mattress. The mattress is stuffed with dried straw and perhaps a little wool laid on top of a simple wooden frame. It is not soft, not by modern standards, but to Thomas it is perfectly comfortable. The cottage around him is small. It has one main room that serves as kitchen, bedroom, and living space all at once. There is a second small room in the back for storing food and tools. The walls are made of wattle and daub, thin wooden sticks woven together and plastered with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung. It sounds crude, but it holds warmth surprisingly well. In winter, Thomas and his family would sleep with their livestock just a thin wall away, the body heat from the animals helping to warm the home. He sits up slowly. He does not speak. He does not make any sudden movements. He simply sits at the edge of his bed in the dark for a long moment, breathing quietly, listening to the faint sounds of the sleeping village around him. He reaches for his clothes. They were left in a pile nearby. He wears a simple linen undershirt called a chemise that he has likely worn for several days in a row. Over that goes a rough woolen tunic that falls just below his knees. He pulls on thick woolen hose, essentially long stockings, and ties them with a leather cord to a belt around his waist. His shoes are simple leather, tied with laces, worn soft and flexible from years of use. He does not wash his face. He does not brush his teeth, though he may chew on a small twig from a hazel or ash tree, which serves as a kind of natural toothbrush. Clean water is precious, and bathing is a weekly or even monthly event, not a daily one. Thomas steps outside into the cool morning air. The village around him begins to stir very slowly. He can hear the low sound of cattle from the common pasture at the edge of the settlement. A dog barks once lazily from somewhere nearby, then falls silent again. Before Thomas does anything else, he prays. This is important to understand. Medieval life was deeply, completely woven together with religion. The Catholic Church was not just a spiritual institution. It was the center of social life, the keeper of time, the source of law, and the foundation of every farmer's sense of the world. Thomas would have prayed at specific times throughout the day, following the rhythm of what were called the canonical hours, a schedule of prayer that structured every day from dawn to dark and beyond. The first of these is called prime, the hour of first light. Thomas does not go to church at this hour. He simply folds his hands, bows his head, and speaks a brief, quiet prayer in the half-dark outside his door. He is grateful for another day. He asks for good weather. He asks for protection for his family and his crops. Then he goes back inside to eat. Breakfast in medieval England is a modest, quiet affair. Thomas sits down to a small meal of coarse, dark bread, probably rye bread, dense and heavy, and perhaps a bowl of pottage. Pottage is a word you will hear often in medieval food history, and it deserves a moment of attention. It is simply a thick porridge or stew made by boiling grains and vegetables together in a pot over the fire. The ingredients change depending on the season and what is available, but on a typical morning in summer, Thomas's pottage might include oats, dried peas, onions, a few herbs from the garden, perhaps parsley or thyme, and a small bit of salted pork if the household has been fortunate. There is no sugar, there is no coffee, there is no orange juice. There is ale, however, a weak, low-alcohol ale that is safer to drink than water in many medieval settlements where water sources could be contaminated. Thomas drinks a small wooden cup of it with his breakfast. It is barely stronger than modern beer, and it does not make him drunk. It simply hydrates him and provides a small bit of nourishment. His wife Edith tends the fire. Their children, perhaps 2 or 3 of them, ranging in age from a toddler to a boy of 10 or 11, eat beside him in quiet. There is no conversation worth noting. Everyone knows the day ahead. Everyone knows their role. By the time the first thin stripe of pale gold appears on the eastern horizon, Thomas is already pulling on his leather gloves and heading toward the door. There is nothing urgent here. There is nothing to worry about. Just breathe and follow Thomas through his long, quiet day.
Thomas is not a free man. This is one of the most important things to understand about the medieval peasant farmer. Most farmers in medieval England and across Europe were what was called serfs or villeins. They did not own their land. The land belonged to the lord of the manor, a nobleman who lived in a large house or castle at the center of the estate. Thomas works the land, but in exchange he owes the lord a portion of everything he grows, as well as several days of labor each week on the lord's own fields. This system is called feudalism, and it shaped every single aspect of Thomas's life. The fields around Ashwick are arranged in what historians call the open field system. There are usually 2 or 3 very large fields surrounding the village, and each field is divided into long, narrow strips. Thomas owns, or rather holds, perhaps 30 or 40 of these strips scattered across the different fields. His neighbor owns strips right next to his. The lord of the manor owns strips throughout the fields as well. Everyone farms side by side in these great open spaces with no fences between the strips. This morning, Thomas is heading to the north field. It is early July in our story, and the wheat is almost ready to harvest. But before the harvest comes, there is still work to do. The fields need to be walked, checked for disease. Weeds need to be pulled from the edges, and the drainage ditches between the strips need to be cleared. Thomas walks slowly through the morning dew. The grass is wet against his legs. The sky above him has turned from black to deep blue to a soft pale gray, and the sun is just beginning to push its warm orange light across the horizon. Birds are everywhere, skylarks rising into the air above the fields, singing their rippling song into the brightening morning. Crows wheel overhead. Somewhere in the hedgerow at the edge of the field, a wren chatters furiously at nothing. He kneels in the soft earth and begins to pull weeds from the base of the wheat stalks. This is slow work, patient work. He does not rush. He works methodically down the length of his strip, his hands moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who has done this same task hundreds of times before. His knees sink slightly into the damp soil. The smell of the earth, rich, dark, faintly sweet, rises around him. He does not think of much. This is perhaps the most foreign thing about medieval farm life to modern minds. There is no mental background noise of emails and notifications and plans. Thomas thinks about the wheat. He thinks about whether the stalks look healthy. He thinks about the smell of rain he noticed in the air yesterday evening and whether it will come before he gets these rows finished. He thinks about his ox, which has been limping slightly, and whether he will need to speak with the blacksmith about it. His world is small and deep and immediate. By mid-morning, Thomas moves from his own strips to the Lord's domain, the Lord's private farmland. 2 or 3 mornings this is required. It is called week work, and it is the heart of the feudal labor obligation. If Thomas refuses to do week work, the Lord's bailiff, a kind of farm manager and enforcer, can take Thomas's animals, his grain, or even his right to stay on the land. On the domain this morning, Thomas joins a group of perhaps 15 or 20 other villagers. There are men and women here, young and old. They are plowing a section of fallow field, preparing it for a crop next season. Thomas guides his ox with quiet, low words. The ox is a large, patient animal, dark brown with wide, curving horns, and it responds to his voice and the gentle pull of the rope, as if this slow walking back and forth across the field is simply what the universe was made for. The plow itself is heavy and wooden, tipped with iron. It cuts through the dense turf and turns it over in dark, earthy ribbons. Thomas holds the plow steady with both hands, leaning his full weight against it on the turns. It is hard physical work, but it is rhythmic and slow, and the repetition has a kind of meditative quality. Back and forth, back and forth. The field expands behind him, row by row, strip by strip. The other villagers work nearby. There is quiet conversation, a few words about the weather, about whether the miller has been cheating on the grinding fees again, about a birth in the village the night before. But mostly there is just the sound of work, the creak of the plow, the heavy breath of the oxen, the soft thud of footsteps in the soil.
Around midday, work stops. This is another thing that is beautifully different about medieval time. There is no pushing through lunch. There is no eating a sandwich at your desk while you keep working. The middle of the day is for rest, for eating, and for the canonical hour of prayer called sext, the 6th hour, high noon. Thomas and the other farmers return to their homes or settle in the shade at the edge of the field. He sits with his back against a low stone wall, his legs stretched out in front of him, his face turned up toward the warm sun. He closes his eyes for a moment and simply breathes. The main meal of the day, called dinner in medieval England, not the evening meal, is now. Thomas's wife Edith has been preparing it. She brings it to him in a cloth bundle, more bread, a generous portion of pottage that has been simmering over the fire all morning, and perhaps a piece of hard cheese made from their cow's milk. If it is a feast day, or if there has been a lucky catch or slaughter, there might be a small piece of meat, salt pork, a few strips of bacon, or in summer, perhaps a small bird that one of the children caught in a trap. But meat is not an everyday feature of the medieval peasant diet. It is a luxury, a treat, something to be savored when it appears. Thomas eats slowly. He does not eat standing up or walking around. He sits and he chews and he rests. After eating, if the weather allows, he may lie on his back in the grass for a short time. This midday rest is not laziness. It is simply how the day is structured. Physical labor in the medieval world is so intense that the body genuinely needs this pause. He looks up at the sky. A few white clouds drift slowly from west to east, high and soft against the blue.
A red kite circles lazily over the distant tree line. The world is very, very quiet. The afternoon brings different work depending on the season. In our July day, with harvest approaching, Thomas spends the afternoon on a dozen smaller tasks that never seem to end on a medieval farm. He tends his kitchen garden, the small plot of land immediately behind the cottage. This garden is Edith's domain mostly, but Thomas helps with the heavier digging and maintenance. The kitchen garden contains the everyday vegetables and herbs that sustain the family through the year. Onions, leeks, garlic, cabbages, beans, peas, and a tangle of herbs, mint, sage, fennel, and rue. These are not grown for sale, they are grown purely to eat, to flavor the pottage, and to preserve as medicine. Medieval medicine is another world entirely. There are no hospitals, no pharmacies, no trained doctors for people like Thomas. When someone in the family falls ill, they rely on herbal remedies passed down through generations, on prayer and pilgrimage, and occasionally on the local wise woman, an older woman in the village with knowledge of healing plants and folk remedies. Edith herself knows which plants reduce fever, which can ease a headache, which roots, when boiled, will soothe a cough. This knowledge is not written down anywhere. It lives in memory, in whispered instructions from mother to daughter for centuries. After the garden, Thomas checks on his animals. He has an ox, the one he uses for plowing, a cow, half a dozen sheep, and a small flock of chickens. The chickens wander freely around the cottage yard, pecking at the ground. The sheep are on the common pasture on the far side of the village. The cow is tethered near the cottage, and Thomas moves her to a fresh patch of grass, speaking quietly to her as he does. He checks her hooves, he checks her udder, he makes sure her water trough is full. He does the same with the ox, and notices with quiet relief that the limp seems slightly better today than yesterday. He runs his hand along the ox's broad, warm flank and speaks to it softly. The animal exhales in a slow, contented breath. There is fence mending to do on the north side of his strips. A section of the low earthen bank that marks the boundary has crumbled slightly after the spring rains. He spends a quiet hour piling and tamping the soil back into place, working with a wooden spade, alone in the afternoon sun. And then there is the matter of thatch. The roof of the cottage needs attention before winter. Thatch, the thick bundle of dried reeds or straw that covers the roof, deteriorates over time and must be repaired each year. Thomas's cottage is thatched with rye straw, and there is a section above the back room that has grown thin and will let in water if it is not patched. He has a bundle of fresh straw prepared, and he spends part of the afternoon on a ladder leaning against the cottage wall, carefully working the new straw into the existing thatch, binding it down with twisted straw ties. He does not hurry. He does each task completely and then moves to the next.
Before he sleeps, Thomas prays one last time. The evening canonical hour is called compline, the completion of the day. It is a prayer of thanks, a prayer of protection, a quiet asking for safety through the night. The night, in medieval minds, is a dangerous time, not just physically, but spiritually. Demons and evil spirits were believed to roam after dark. Prayers at bedtime were a genuine act of protection, not just ritual. Thomas kneels beside his bed on the packed earthen floor of the cottage. The fire has burned down to glowing orange embers that cast a dim, wavering warmth across the room. He folds his hands, bows his head, and speaks his prayers in quiet, practiced Latin phrases, though he likely does not understand their full meaning. He learned them from repetition, from hearing them spoken at Mass hundreds of times. They are familiar sounds, comforting in their sameness. He lies down on his straw mattress and pulls a rough wool blanket over himself. The blanket is heavy and slightly scratchy, but warm. Edith settles beside him. Outside, the village is completely, utterly silent. There is no traffic, there is no electrical hum. There is only the occasional soft creak of the thatch settling in a gentle night breeze, the distant bark of a fox, and the breathing of the sleeping village. Thomas closes his eyes. He will sleep, perhaps, 7 or 8 hours, an unbroken, deep, exhausted sleep, the sleep of a body that has worked itself completely through every hour of daylight. Tomorrow will be almost exactly the same as today, and the day after, and the season after, and the year after. His world is small, but it is complete. The wheat is nearly ready, the animals are fed, the children are safe, the fire will hold until morning. And the stars above Ashwick tonight are as thick and bright as scattered salt across black velvet, with no light for miles and miles in any direction to dim them. Thomas does not see the stars. He is already asleep. And here we are at the end of a long, quiet day, a day lived in the slow, patient rhythm of the medieval world. No rushing, no noise, no distraction. Just the turning of the earth, the growth of the wheat, the warmth of the fire, and the weight of honest tiredness at the close of the day. You have walked the fields of Ashwick. You have felt the damp morning grass. You have smelled the wood smoke and the damp earth. You have heard the skylarks, the slow exhale of the ox, the creak of the thatch in the night wind. Let that world stay with you now as you drift. The fields are quiet, the stars are bright, and somewhere in medieval England, Thomas sleeps. And you can too. Good night.